Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. It's Nathaniel from Chessit, and today we are going to be doing a puzzle palooza. That's right, 10 chess.com daily puzzles analyzed consecutively. So without further ado, let's get into the video. This first puzzle took a bit of thinking, but as many of the other chess.com puzzles are, it is a series of forcing moves that results in checkmate. And we can conclude this by realizing that Black's king is on the corner in h8 and is actually trapped in by his rook on g8, which we can exploit later. But also we realize that we're down 3 points of material and there's no clear way to win material. In fact, we will actually be losing material pretty soon, considering Black has adequate pressure on our bishop on d3, which is pinned to our queen. You see, has two attackers, we have two defenders, but our king's in a dire position, so we've got to use our initiative to deliver a series of forcing moves to deliver mate. And we can do this by looking at checks, and we see that we only have one check, which is knight g6 check, and we see that this is a forcing move. Black is forced to move to king h7, and from here, you can actually calculate all of this in your head. You don't have to kind of guess for this puzzle. You can see that after this move, the check knight f8 will be available. This actually comes with a double check, right? Bishop discovery check. So Black once again is forced to move back to h8, and from here, well, there's actually a brilliant move, which is a queen sack. And the difference, the reason why we're able to play the queen sack this time is because we've moved our knight off that square. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So first we play knight g6, right? This opens the diagonal for our queen. This forces the king to come forward. After the king comes forward, as I said, we play knight f8 check. This reveals a discovery check on the king and forces the king to move back to h8, only move. And from here, the easiest way to get to Black's king in this position is to actually play a queen sack, which is queen takes h6 check. Once again, this is a forcing move. Black's only move is to take on h6 with his pawn, and from here we have rook h7 checkmate. Our next daily puzzle is titled An Attacking Wrinkle, and this is the December 7th Saturday puzzle. And this one took me a little while to get, and actually a couple attempts, but it relies on a few things. One, we have a strong attack, right? Two knights and a queen versus Black's king, which is stuck on g8 in the corner, really, and the only close defender is Black's knight. So the immediate move that I thought of while trying to solve this puzzle was knight takes, with the goal being that it forces Black to take, and now his position's open. But from here, I struggled to find a new plan, as I didn't see any immediate checks. However, upon further review, I noticed that after Black takes back on f6, we actually have a fork, playing knight e to d7. And I noticed that this fork actually attacks Black's queen, and from here, Black is either forced to give up his queen or give up checkmate. So, the first move is knight takes f6 check. Black is essentially forced to take back, because if he decides to move his king to h8, for example, we just have mate in 1, queen takes h7 mate. So Black is forced to take. And here, as I said, we play knight d7, forking Black's queen on b6 and Black's rook on f8. And as I said as well, there are no real checks or setup moves that work in this position, unfortunately. So that is what is so tricky, just seeing this fork. So you play knight d7, and the only way to prevent checkmate by the sequence I'm about to show you is to move your rook, or is for Black to move his rook, or for Black to give up his queen by playing like queen d8, for example, which just loses to knight takes f6 check, and then the queen has to take to prevent mate. So In this position, black just is greedy and wants to save his queen and conserve his pieces. So he plays queen c6, threatening mate in 1 on the next move. However, from here it's too late, as we have a series of forcing moves, as I said before. We play first, knight takes f6 check, and the king, once again, can move to h8, but then we have queen takes h7 checkmate, so the king actually moves up, and he's threatening our knight, so we cannot take on h7 just yet, but instead we play another knight check, knight h5 check. The king can't come forward, because if he comes forward to g6, for example, then we simply have mate in 1, queen f6 mate, and if he comes to h6, for example, we simply have queen f6 mate as well. So black is forced to move to h8, as he does in the puzzle, and from here we play queen check, queen f6 check. Black is forced to move to g8, and we have queen g7 checkmate. Now, that's it for this puzzle. It was a bit of a tricky one, but let's move on to the next puzzle. Now, moving on to the puzzle titled Sus Rook, we can see that we are down a rook to a knight in a pawn endgame. We do have 2 extra pawns, but usually this would be lost. However, this puzzle contains an insane and brutal tactic that will blow your minds. So, first, immediately, what I'm sure most of us thought is simply just push the pawn, right? Push the pawn on b6 to b7, get inch closer to that promotion square, and to be honest, this is the only plan that I see is available, right? Black is unable to take the knight on e5 because we'll promote, so black's forced to play king c7, or black could play rook b3, but if we push and black plays rook b3, for example, we simply can promote, and then after takes, we have a fork and win the game. So that I was able to see. However, I could still see no further plan for pushing on b7 after king c7. And to be honest, I don't think anyone but a grandmaster could. So I trusted my gut. I simply played pawn b7, and from here black plays king c7, right, avoiding the eventual fork for now that I was talking about. And from here, I'm gonna admit I gave up. I thought for a good 10-15 minutes. I could not find the solution. Yet the solution is actually knight d7, and the point of knight d7 is if we promote, if black doesn't take on b7, for example, we're able to promote to a queen and win the game. Like, if black goes here, we just promote, black's forced to take, we win. If black takes our knight, we promote and win. But after after king takes our pawn on b7, the game becomes a bit unclear. I mean, it looks like we should be losing, but this is the correct solution to the puzzle. How can we possibly be winning? Well, with this one brutal move, being king f2. And believe it or not, as crazy as this sounds, black's rook is trapped. In a board that is so open, his rook cannot move anywhere. Let's take the squares on the 3rd rank, for example. f3 and h3 are covered by pawns, c3 and a3 are covered by pawns, and if black were to move to d3 or b3, for example, we simply have a fork by playing knight c5 check. So, for example, black plays rook d3, we play check and win the rook. Black plays rook b3, we play knight check and win the rook. And once again, black can't move to g3 as our king covers. So let's think about the e file. Our king covers these 3 squares, e1, e2, e3. And once again, if black were to move his rook to e4 or e6, for example, he simply loses to a fork. And if black were to move his rook to e5, well, our knight covers that square. So, as unbelievable as it seems, wherever black moves, he will lose his rook. And I believe in the puzzle, he moves rook b3, we play this fork, and we win the rook and win the game. Alright everyone, on to the next puzzle. Now, moving on, this is the December 9th puzzle titled Hikaru's Harmonious Birthday Mate. And from here, we can see that we have a very, very strong attack on White's king on g2. We can see that we have 2 knights ready to enter the game, and a rook on h8, threatening to play h2. And from here, it's a very clear mating sequence. It's actually mate in 4, but in the puzzle, White makes an inaccuracy and causes it to be mate in 3. So, if we're just looking for checks that work, well, the only one we have besides knight e3 is rook h2 check. And if we play knight a3, we simply lose the knight and we'll most likely lose the game. So, instead we play rook h2 check. White can either play king g1 or king f1, which are his only moves, and in the puzzle, White goes king g1, which causes the mating sequence to be a bit shorter, but I'll go back to what happens if White plays king f1. So after White plays king g1, we play knight f3 check, actually forcing the king to go to f1, and we play rook takes f2 checkmate. But moving back, what if White were to play king f1? Well, if White plays king f1, once again we have rook takes f2 check. White is forced to go back to g1. We have knight check. White is forced to go to h1, and we have rook h2 checkmate. This puzzle is fairly simple compared to the last one we analyzed, but it's very good for pattern recognition and just seeing when you have checkmates given a strong attack on the king. Anyways, on to the next puzzle. Now, moving on to the 5th puzzle, we have the December 11th puzzle titled Vishy's Birthday King Hunt. And this puzzle has numerous checkmate variations, but we are going to look at only the puzzle solution, and the reason why is because all the variations are similar. It just involves like queen sacks, etc., all that boring stuff. So, first we can see that our bishop on g8 is pinned. We have a knight on e4, which is unprotected, and we have a queen on d1. And we can also notice that White's king is on f5, which is kind of in the middle of the board in our territory, and we're actually able to chase White's king. And since White's king is in the middle, we are able to attack it easily. So what I looked for immediately were checks, and there were a couple of good options that I found. One is to play queen d5 check, one is to play queen d7 check, and one was to play knight g3 check. So first, I kind of looked at knight g3 check, but after we play knight g3 check, White simply has king f6, and funny enough, even though he's come forward into our territory, we have barely any more checks, or we actually don't have any more checks, and furthermore, White is threatening mate on the next move. So that knight move isn't going to work. And then I looked at the move queen d5 check, and this move actually works, although I didn't see it earlier, but it's a much longer mate line. However, after we play this move, White goes king g4, and from here it's a bit tough to calculate. We have queen d1 check, and then White can go to king f5, and then there's a whole line where we chase and mate him. But the way the puzzle goes, and a much faster mate, is to actually play queen d7. And at first I thought, wait, am I not just hanging my knight on e4? However, after king takes, we simply have mate in 1, queen d5, checkmate. So White is actually forced to play king g6. Once again, if White's king were to move to e5, we simply have queen d5, checkmate. So White plays king g6. We continue to chase his king by playing queen e6. I mean, here, let's just look for other checks. We have queen g7, which blunders mate. We have queen h7, but after playing queen h7, White's king is able to escape to h5, and we simply don't have any more checks. So the only check that works without us either sacking the game or losing our queen is queen e6 check. Black from here is forced to either block, which leads to a mate in 3, which I'm not going to look at, or move his king to h5, which allows us to play knight g3 checkmate. And that was this puzzle. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, moving on, we've got a puzzle titled A Push in the Right Direction. And from this puzzle, we can see that we are actually down a pawn in what seems to be a middle game, right? Rooks are on the board, and we actually have a bishop pair to a bishop and a knight. So we can see we have a near checkmate threat. Bishop g4 is almost checkmate, right? Because our rook on f8 cuts off the entire f file, and placing our bishop on g4 would occupy this entire diagonal, which only leaves which leaves no squares for the king to escape to, and which forces the knight to come block. And we like forcing moves, so this line intrigued me. So after we force the knight to block on f3, there's another great move, which is actually to push our pawn on e5 forward. And the idea is here that we'll be pinning the knight, and then also we'll be threatening black's bishop on b2 by revealing this line, this diagonal. So I'm actually going to cover the line here, which is the solution to the puzzle. So our best move is to play bishop g4 check. Black is forced to play knight f3, and from here we can simply push our pawn, as I said, which has a dual purpose. 1, it'll attack the pinned knight, which can't move away, and 2, it opens up an attack on the bishop, on white's bishop on b2. So white's best move here is to capture our bishop on g7, and here we don't play too hastily and take back with our king, because if we take back with the king, then white is simply able to capture on e4, right? The reason why e4 worked in the first place is because if white takes, we actually take white's bishop on b2 with a threat on the rook, and also a threat on this knight. So from here, after white captures our bishop on g7, we don't play too hastily and take back, and instead we deliver a check while also capturing white's knight on f3 with our pawn, of course, because if we take with our bishop, then white's pawn on g2 is able to take back. So we take on f3 with the pawn, white takes back with their pawn, we take back with our bishop as it's protected by the rook on f8. White is forced essentially to move to d2, and we're able to now finally recapture the bishop on g7, putting us up 2 points of material, or essentially a piece up in material, in a game approaching endgame, which, as we know, is winning. Now, on to the next puzzle. Alright, so moving on, we've got a puzzle titled Forcing Moves Flurry. And as the name suggests, we are going to be forcing checkmate through a series of forcing moves. Now, what I first noticed while looking at this puzzle is that we have a battering ram set up on the g-file. The only defender of the g7 pawn is black's knight on e8. And other than that, black's king is really stuck in the corner. So we can also notice that we have a bishop on b2, that diagonal staring directly at the g7 square, putting more pressure on it. And that we have a rook on b1 that's able to swing over to g1 at any time, which will be important later. The only piece that black is attacking is our bishop on b2 with his knight on c4. So we'll have to keep in mind that for later, but black is also attacking our queen on g5, and we absolutely do not want to lose our queen, because if we do, or even trade off our queen, because if we do, we'll lose an attack. Now you guys may be asking, where's the attack? Well, we don't have one yet, but we can create an attack by opening up black's king. And we can do this by, yeah, you guessed it, sacrificing the queen on g7. So after playing queen takes g7, black is forced to take on g7 with the knight. Remember, the only defender black has in that area. And from here, we continue on with our battering ram, also realizing that we have a bishop on b2, attacking this g7 square. We play rook takes g7 check. Black is forced to play king h8, and from here it gets tricky because your first instinct is going to be to play a discovery check, right, with the rook. Moving the rook anywhere reveals this check on the king. However, as I mentioned earlier, our bishop is actually under the attack of Black's knight on c4, and therefore, if we deliver a check with the bishop, he can simply capture it, and we will not have any mating threat even after sacrificing the queen. So instead, we have to continue playing the only other forcing move in this position, which is to play rook g8, which forces Black to take back on g8 with the king, right? Because we're still covering this bishop's diagonal, or we're still covering the diagonal with our bishop, and therefore Black can't take back with the rook. So we play rook g8 check. Black is forced to take back with the king. And from here, we have mate in 2, because as I mentioned earlier, we're able to swing our rook over to g1, our rook on b1 over to g1, delivering check, and from here, Black simply does not have any way to protect himself besides sacrificing the queen by playing queen g5, which is ultimately futile as we're able to take the queen and deliver checkmate. Once again, Black's king is out of escape squares, and we took away the only defender of the g7 tile, which was the knight. And that's this puzzle, so let's keep this analysis moving with our next puzzle. On to December 14th's puzzle titled Checkmate Weaver. We can see, as the name sort of hints at, that we're going to be setting up a mating net. And if you guys don't know what a mating net is, it's a situation where we use a series of moves to ensure that no matter what move Black makes, it will always result in checkmate. We essentially trap the king or make it so Black doesn't have any further good moves. And we can actually do this in this position by playing bishop f6. As by playing bishop f6, we're cutting off all of Black's escape squares. Remember, we have a rook on g7, which covers all of his escape squares, and we're threatening to play g4 checkmate on the next move. So the first move is going to be playing bishop f6. Black doesn't have any moves to the king, and we're threatening mate in 1, so he has to defend the square which we are planning to deliver a check, and the only way to do this is by playing bishop e6. But we continue to set up the mating threat. That's what a mating net is. Essentially, we use a tempo to ensure that no matter what is played, it will always result in mate. So we play f3 with the idea of delivering this mate, and since there aren't two defenders of the square, Black has no way to prevent us from eventually playing g4 checkmate. So here, Black can play literally any move. They all result in mate in 2. Let's say he pushes, like in the puzzle, pushes this pawn to d2. We simply play g4 check. Black's only move is to take with the bishop, and we deliver f takes g4 checkmate. Now, this puzzle is great because it shows the principles of a mating net, and it also has you on the lookout, not only for checks, but also for threats. Now, with that out of the way, let's move on to our next puzzle. Alright everyone, moving on to our penultimate puzzle titled Go for the Queen. We have a pawn on h7 ready to promote, and we have a rook on c8 covering the promotion square, as well as a rook on d2. Now, with the title Go for the Queen, my initial thought on this puzzle was to take the queen immediately with our rook, to take Black's queen rather immediately with our rook, but if we do this, Black simply takes our rook on d2 with his bishop, and we have no way to promote, and we're down a bishop in an endgame, and that doesn't work. So instead, I thought about another way we could go for the queen, and that's actually by promoting. And promotion leads to a simple mate in 2, right? It's not too hard to see. After we play h8, promotion into a queen, Black's king is forced to play king f8, and from here we have queen f8 checkmate. So this puzzle was a short one. I'd say a beginner-friendly puzzle. Now let's move into our last puzzle. All right, everyone. Our 10th and final puzzle is titled One Loose Piece Leads to Another. And in this puzzle, we can see that we are in equal material in a middle game, yet we have two threats. One, we're threatening Black's bishop on d3, and two, we're threatening Black's knight on a4 with our queen on d1. So, from here, we have two clear moves. We don't have any checks. That leaves these threats and captures, and we have to evaluate which capture is actually better. If we take a look at rook takes d3, we see that since Black has a knight on a4, he is free to take our bishop on c3, which only has one defender, with his rook, because he'll have two attackers, right? So he takes our bishop on c3 with our rook, and from here, we could trade rooks, and Black is able to escape, and this is most likely a drawn endgame. Yet, we want to win. So let's evaluate the other capture real quick. We can see that if we take the knight on a4, then we won't have the same problems with taking Black's bishop on d3 later on in the future, as we will remove a key attacker of the c3 square. So we play queen takes a4, and Black's only move is to play rook takes c3, because if Black decides to move his bishop, which is under attack, away, then he'll simply just be down a piece, right? We just captured a knight for free. So Black takes, attempting to equalize material, and from here we have a fork by playing queen d4, which forks both the bishop on d3 and the rook on c3. And in the puzzle, Black goes queen c6, which defends the rook, yet we are still able to capture Black's bishop on d3 with our rook on f3, and after Black takes our rook on d3, we're able to trade, and from here we are up a knight in an endgame and should be able to win. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. As you imagined, this video took a lot of time to record, and it is currently the longest video on my channel. If you guys have enjoyed this analysis, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Peace.